She was more than just a singer, she was a legend. Marvella Langston's sultry voice and timeless hits made her a household name, an icon of R&B whose music shaped a generation. But behind the glamour, behind the awards and accolades, lay a family fractured by resentment, entitlement, and greed. On a quiet evening in her sprawling Atlanta estate, that resentment would boil over into something unthinkable. A brutal, senseless act that would leave the music world in mourning and a family shattered beyond repair. At the center of it all, a son consumed by bitterness. A granddaughter caught in the crossfire. A legacy forever stained by betrayal. How does a bond as sacred as that between a mother and son crumble into such horror? How does love curdle into something dark enough to end in bloodshed? Tonight, we uncover the shocking case of Marvella Langston, her rise, her tragic fall, and the twisted web of greed that led to her murder. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more disturbing stories of crime, betrayal, and the darkest corners of human nature. Marvella Langston was more than an R&B singer, she was a force of nature. With a voice that could melt the hardest of hearts and lyrics that spoke to the soul, she dominated the airwaves throughout the 1980s. Her sultry ballads and electrifying performances earned her multiple Grammy Awards, platinum records, and a legacy that few could rival. But Marvella wasn't just a singer. She was a shrewd businesswoman, turning her fame into a multimillion-dollar empire. Through royalties, real estate investments, and a line of beauty products that catered to women of color, she built a fortune estimated at $20 million. Despite her success, Marvella never forgot where she came from. Born and raised in Atlanta, she grew up in a modest household, the daughter of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. It was her mother's resilience that shaped Marvella into the fiercely independent woman she became. She was strong-willed, sharp, and unafraid to take control of her own destiny. That same determination extended to her personal life, where she balanced her role as a loving grandmother with that of a powerful matriarch. But even the most legendary figures have their burdens, and for Marvella, that burden was her only son, Rashad Langston. At 42 years old, Rashad was the complete opposite of his mother. A failed musician with a long history of poor choices, he had spent most of his life struggling to find direction. As a teenager, he had dreams of following in Marvella's footsteps, but talent alone wasn't enough. He lacked discipline, constantly battling addiction and an unwillingness to put in the hard work that his mother had endured. Marvella, despite her frustration, never turned her back on him. She funded his failed music career, bailed him out of financial troubles, and provided him with a comfortable lifestyle that he never truly earned. For a brief moment, he didn't move. Then, finally, he let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head as if he still couldn't believe it had come to this, that I was supposed to be the star, he mumbled, his voice slurred. As they cuffed him and read him his rights, Rashad didn't fight. The cameras were waiting outside, flashing relentlessly as he was led into the squad car. The story was everywhere now. The music world mourned. Fans raged. Aaliyah's classmates wept. The son of a legend had written his own tragic ending. And the world would never forgive him. Outside, Marvella's fans wept. Aaliyah's classmates left flowers outside the estate where she had once lived, where she had dreamed of following in her grandmother's footsteps. The music industry mourned not just the loss of a legend, but the horrifying betrayal that had brought her life to an end. Justice had been served, but no sentence could undo the tragedy. Rashad Langston would spend the rest of his life behind bars, but the echoes of his crime would never fade. The world was left reeling in the wake of the horrific crime that claimed the lives of Marvella Langston and her granddaughter, Aaliyah. The music industry, fans, and those closest to Marvella struggled to come to terms with the brutal betrayal that ended the life of a woman who had given so much to the world. Tributes poured in from fellow musicians, longtime collaborators, and devoted admirers who had grown up with her music. Across social media, #JusticeForMarvella and #RememberAleeyah trended as millions expressed their grief and outrage over a crime so senseless and cruel. Outside Marvella's grand estate in Atlanta, fans gathered in mourning, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten letters at the gates. Some played her greatest hits, their voices breaking as they sang along, while others simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by the tragedy. It was a cruel irony that a woman who had sung about love, resilience, and survival had fallen victim to such a heartless act of violence, one committed by her own flesh and blood, the industry honored her in the only way they knew how. A tribute concert was quickly organized, featuring some of the biggest names in R&B and soul, all of whom had been influenced by Marvella's artistry. The stage was bathed in soft purple light, her signature color, as her most iconic songs were performed by those who had once looked up to her as a mentor and inspiration. The event raised millions for domestic violence awareness and family crime prevention initiatives, ensuring that Marvella's name would continue to be attached to something meaningful, rather than the horror of her final moments. Yet, for those closest to her, the pain lingered in a way that no amount of tributes or public mourning could heal. The Langston family was shattered beyond repair. Rashad's actions had not only taken the lives of his mother and daughter but had left a permanent stain on their legacy. The once proud Langston name, synonymous with excellence and perseverance, was now tied to one of the most shocking betrayals in music history. Aaliyah's absence was perhaps the most gut-wrenching of all. She had been on the verge of something great, a young girl poised to follow in her grandmother's footsteps. Friends from her performing arts school spoke about her infectious energy, her dreams of becoming an artist, and how she had been excited about an upcoming showcase. But all of that had been stolen from her in a single night of rage. Her funeral was a heartbreaking affair, attended by classmates who struggled to process the loss of someone so young and full of potential. For many, the most difficult part to accept was the fact that Rashad had been given so many chances to change his life. Marvella had spent decades trying to help him, offering support, financial stability, and opportunities that most people could only dream of. But Rashad had resented her generosity rather than appreciating it. In the end, his entitlement consumed him, leading him to destroy the very people who had loved him the most. Even from behind bars, Rashad's name would forever be linked to one of the most devastating betrayals in recent memory. As he sat in his prison cell, the world moved on without him. Marvella's music continued to be played, her legacy living on in the hearts of those who cherished her art. Aaliyah, though gone too soon, was remembered as the bright light she had been, a girl who should have had the world at her feet. Despite the horror of what had happened, one truth remains unshaken: Marvella Langston's voice, her spirit, and her impact would never be erased. Even in the midst of the sorrow, Marvella's legacy endured. Her music lived on, her influence immortalized in the voices of the next generation. And as time passed, the world chose to remember her not for how she died, but for the brilliance with which she had lived. This case is a haunting testament to the devastating consequences of unchecked greed, entitlement, and resentment. Marvella Langston was more than just a singer, she was a symbol of strength, perseverance, and artistry. She built an empire with her own hands, giving the world music that resonated through generations. Yet, in the end, the very person she had spent her life protecting became the one who betrayed her in the most brutal way imaginable. Rashad Langston was not just a son who lost his way, he was a man who had been given every opportunity to turn his life around. Marvella had supported him, given him financial stability, and even raised his daughter when he could not. But instead of gratitude, he harbored resentment. Instead of accountability, he blamed his mother for his own failures. And when faced with the reality that she would no longer enable him, he chose violence over self-reflection. Aaliyah Langston was just 14 years old, a young girl full of promise, with a future waiting to unfold. She was the one Marvella had entrusted with her legacy, the next generation meant to carry on her name. But Rashad, consumed by jealousy and greed, took that away in a single, monstrous act. He not only destroyed his mother but also erased the future of his own daughter, making himself the ultimate architect of his family's downfall. Could this tragedy have been avoided? If Marvella had been firmer with Rashad from the start, if she had stopped bailing him out earlier, would things have turned out differently? Or was Rashad always destined to self-destruct, dragging down everyone around him in the process? It's a question that lingers, one with no easy answer. The lesson here is chilling yet clear: sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers but from those closest to us. Love, when taken for granted, can become a weapon in the hands of the entitled. How do we protect the people we care about from those who believe they are owed what they have not earned? And how do we recognize when the ties that bind us are the very ones that could lead to our undoing? Marvella Langston's story is one of triumph and tragedy, a life that soared to incredible heights only to be cut down by the one person she had given everything to. But while her end was unjust, her legacy will never be defined by Rashad's betrayal. Her voice, her music, and the impact she had on the world will outlive the horror of her final moments. If this story shocked you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life cases that expose the darkest corners of human nature. Because as we've seen time and time again, sometimes, the most terrifying betrayals happen behind the doors of our own homes.